I'll tell you what, I'm happy to stand. It may be a little tough for me to see some of my notes because I'm getting a little older, but I'm going to do my best, okay? Is this better? Okay. So I just wanted to thank all of you as well. This is a tremendous crowd. It's a great turnout, and you've come out on a weeknight, obviously, because this is a town that means a great deal to you. You care about your community, and you're here to express yourselves. Look, I get that. This is your town. This is where you live. It's very personal. You deserve to hear directly from the folks who are up here tonight, and you deserve to be heard by all of us. So I think this is a very important gathering, and I'm very pleased to be part of it. I want to tell you a little bit, very directly, about my role in this issue and why I'm here, and also what I hope we might be able to accomplish together tonight. First of all, I've been representing the 2nd Congressional District now for the past 3 years, and something that you may not know about the 2nd District and is relevant to our discussion tonight is that it includes 30 different Indian tribes. Now, I was just in Alaska a few weeks ago. They've got over 250 different Indian tribes. They are number 1 in the country, but the second most tribes in a congressional district is mine, is ours. So that's a significant thing, that I represent a lot of Indian country, and as you can imagine, my staff and I deal very frequently with the many needs and issues presented by a real diverse community of tribes throughout this district. It includes everything from Indian health care to tribal courts and public safety issues, subsistence, salmon fisheries. We've even had one instance where we've grappled with how tribal sovereignty relates to our conflicting state and federal laws on marijuana legality. So there's a lot there. It's a lot of complex issues that we have. I'm also honored, obviously, to represent a lot of wonderful non-tribal communities in the 2nd District, places like Windsor that are beautiful and tranquil, some of the most desirable places anybody would ever want to live. I try to work very closely with the local government representatives of all of these different communities because I want to make sure that working together, we're doing the right thing for the folks that we represent. And one of the issues that can come up from time to time that has the potential to pit the tribal communities versus the non-tribal communities in my district, or in any district really, are when a tribe wants to take land into trust. I have a number of tribes in my district right now, actually, with pending land to trust proposals. Several of them have asked me to introduce legislation at various times to make that happen. And so what I tried to do from the time I came into office, to be fair to both the tribal and the non-tribal communities I represent, was to articulate a very clear standard for when I would consider that kind of a bill. The first requirement, it's a 2-part standard for me. The first requirement is I'll only introduce land to trust legislation when tribes and impacted local governments are on the same page. Local government support, or at least non-opposition, is absolutely critical to me, because it tells me whether the proposal is fair and workable to the local community. And the second condition that I have to even consider is whether there's a casino. I will not carry any legislation that allows for any new casinos. Now, why the red line on casinos? Well, some of you may know that my history on these issues actually goes back many years, from before the time I got to Congress. As an assemblyman representing southern Sonoma and Marin County, I fought long and hard against the Grayton Casino project in Rohnert Park. In fact, I had the pleasure of driving through some of that casino traffic tonight, and I apologize that that helped make me later than I would have been. I was one of the most high-profile opponents of that land to trust proposal, and certainly of that casino. I even introduced legislation in Sacramento to try to make local government approval a mandatory condition for new casinos like Grayton's. Now, unfortunately, in the case of Grayton, we lost. The federal government took the land into trust over our very vocal opposition. There was litigation to try to stop it, and many of the same legal arguments that some of the opponents of this particular project have advanced, are continuing to advance as part of this debate, were tried unsuccessfully. They were rejected, and at the end of the day, we now have a huge casino in Rohnert Park to go along with the very substantial casino up the road at River Rock, despite both of them being fiercely opposed by local residents and local governments. Now, that does not mean, and I'm not trying to suggest, that all Indian gaming proposals are inevitable, we should just capitulate. But I think what it does mean, the lesson that we should all take, is that a tribe's land to trust application with the BIA is very likely to be granted even in the face of community opposition. So, if you have an opportunity to work with a tribe to limit the impacts of a trust application and especially to prevent a casino, I think that's something that everyone should be very motivated to consider and try to work with and try to make happen. And that is why when the County of Sonoma and the Board of Supervisors informed me that they had negotiated a long-term agreement with the Lytton tribe that prohibited a new casino, that also included mitigation funding, enforceable environmental safeguards, and some limitations on the type of development that could occur, including a very clear prohibition on a new casino, I was impressed. That doesn't happen very often. In fact, I'm not really aware of any other case where that kind of an agreement has actually emerged. And so when they asked me to introduce federal legislation to make that happen, to protect this agreement against a possible conflicting decision by the BIA, which is a risk that we need to talk about more and everybody needs to fully understand, I said I would do it because it meets that two-part standard that I have laid out, and because it looked to me like it was a smart and indeed, I think, a very unprecedented achievement that the county had put together. And I was also impressed, I want to emphasize this too, that the Lytton tribe had taken this approach to make compromises, to sit down and negotiate with local governments instead of what we see much more typically around the country, which is tribes that take the adversarial approach, which simply go through the BIA and do not try to work things out with local government. Obviously, that creates lots of conflict, litigation, but I think we know, whether it's Grayton or River Rock or the many other examples we have, that has typically gone against local government. So, I want to talk about what happens without this memorandum of agreement between Sonoma County and without the federal legislation component to it that I have been working on. Is this inevitable, that the land would go into trust? That's something that I think all of us, need to very carefully consider. I know that I have looked at it. I have had my staff look at it, the staff at the Natural Resources Committee, which includes lawyers who've been working on these issues for a long, long time. You just heard from an esteemed attorney who knows these issues very well. And the bottom line is, in fact, even in a legal opinion I've seen circulating from some of the opponents to this project, it's acknowledged that BIA applications for trust status are almost always granted. The question then is whether this Carcieri decision somehow changes things. And I think you just heard a very important point earlier tonight, that even since the Carcieri decision, not a single land to trust application has been denied on the grounds of that decision. The other piece of it, though, is that the administration and the BIA itself has put in place what it considers a workaround for Carcieri. They've developed their own test for what constitutes under federal jurisdiction in 1934. And what it really amounts to is, if there were dealings between those Native Americans and the federal government at that time, even if they weren't known by the same name, even if they weren't called a tribe, that's probably good enough for the BIA to grant that land to trust application. And a second factor to consider is that not only has the BIA developed that workaround, but the Obama administration has set a goal of bringing many, many more acres into trust before they leave office at the end of next year. So whatever you may think of this, that, folks, is the reality of the legal context that we're dealing with, and it's one of the reasons why I think the County of Sonoma was motivated to enter into this agreement, and why I think it deserves everyone's very careful consideration. We're here tonight, obviously, because not everybody considers this agreement and my legislation a cause for celebration, right? I think I get that. I think when it comes to the merits of this issue, we can and should have a very robust conversation. We should talk about the pros and cons. We should talk about the alternatives to this deal. We should talk about what's in the community's best interest. The county's attorney here tonight, thankfully, and Supervisor Gore will be able to tell you some of the details and mechanics of this agreement, why they negotiated certain things, what they mean, and what the alternative might be if those provisions were not in place. Obviously, I would not have introduced federal legislation if I didn't think they had done a pretty good job. But I also want to listen to folks who may see it differently, and that's the value of us coming together tonight. I'm certainly going to keep an open mind and an open ear, and if there are better ways to approach this, let's talk about them tonight, and let's see where it goes. Regarding the process, though, I will be the first to acknowledge that we would be in a much more constructive place if these conversations had happened a few months ago. Yeah. Okay? I have met with some of the neighbors adjacent to this area and heard their concerns. And look, I completely understand it. I understand why many neighbors were surprised. They felt blindsided to learn that there were these maps, there were these negotiations taking place, generally in closed session because of some of the legal aspects of things. When the agreement was announced, some of them were surprised by the size of the agreement, by the scope of what was contained in it. That was different than what they thought might have been under consideration. And so I totally understand, and I think clearly we can acknowledge the public outreach and inclusion should have been better. We all made certain assumptions about that. And I know, maybe I could even speak for Supervisor Gore. I'm guessing, James, that if you and I could go back in time, we would have done a lot more public outreach and a lot more public dialogue with residents before this came to a vote and before folks read about it in the Press Democrat. But here we are. We're working on it, and we have an opportunity tonight to have a very important discussion. I am grateful for the town rescheduling this event so that I could be here. I didn't want a town hall to happen where you had an empty chair that your congressman should have been sitting in. So I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad the other elected officials are here. I'm going to be doing a lot of listening tonight for two reasons. One, out of respect for all of you. This is your community and you deserve to be heard. But the second thing is, as much as I think the county's MOA with the tribe has been carefully crafted and provides important provisions, if there are better ideas, if there are things we didn't get right, I want to hear about it, I want to think about it, and I want us all to keep talking as this goes forward. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for including me tonight.
There's always a delay. Now we'll hear from the county. I think Supervisor Gore first, and you're gonna try to stand. Okay, and then Bruce Goldstein.
Can everybody hear me in the back? Okay, thank you all. Thank you very much for being here. I think whether you're in what you would call the impact zone, a neighbor of this proposed development, or whether you're in the wider Windsor community or the wider Sonoma County community, the reason you're here is because you care, and that's valued, and I appreciate you being here. As we've said, although I was elected 7 months ago, no, a little bit more than that, November of this last year, and although this has a long history, and although you look at it and my board voted unanimously 5-0 on this, I own this issue for you. I'm your representative, right? That's why I'm here. That's the commitment going forward as well. There's a lot of people who are frustrated, and I think there's different frustrations that are at play here. One is the process, as Congressman Huffman alluded to. There was a lot of assumptions made, very honestly, at the beginning of this, discussions about past supervisors and outreach made and other community meetings that were told, and we read the dialogues on them and talking about what we needed to do for community outreach. But at the same time, we're moving forward at this point. The facts are a whole different issue. Because the facts, the reason that's frustration on this issue with the facts is because some of the facts are being disputed. Whether this Carcieri versus Salazar, whether the Indian Reorganization Act, whether the tribe in 1934 was already formed as a tribe, whether it was just Native Americans but not a tribe, whatever those are not things that I can sit here and dispute with you tonight or talk through. The only thing that we can look at is where we are, what the federal laws are, and a distillation of some of the complexity, which is that this tribe legally owns that land and has a legal opportunity to convert it into trust land. And the county has opposed every application of fee to trust, including this, on multiple occasions. But at the same time, you look at other parts of my district and other parts of this county, and you see examples in River Rock with the Dry Creek Band of Pomo Indians. You see examples in Grayton, where we had other things going on there, and things that impact community. And I can tell you one thing that my board is absolutely unified on before I ever arrived, is that gaming is what we need to stop in Sonoma County. And that was one of the core aspects of getting into this agreement, and that was one of the core aspects of moving towards a solution. In addition to all the facts, there's some assertions and I think some questions about intentions. I see signs that say backroom deals. I see websites that talk about dollars being funded to campaigns and candidates and things. I have questions about legal reviews that come up. The only thing I can say about all that is that the people that I know here are driven by what I am, which is facts, compassion, and integrity. And anybody who wants to look at any of us in the eyes and think differently can come and have a conversation with me. I'm going to be here as long as we can afterwards. I want you to know that everybody who is here is trying to do the right thing, including my entire board of supervisors. There's not a single person who got $1,000 from somebody loosely affiliated with the Lytton tribe and their development who is bought off and paid for, no matter what anybody says. I know these people. They care about the facts. I did not knock on 40,000 doors to turn around and create a backroom deal. I care about public service, not politics. If there is anything we can do going forward that can bring the tribe and the community closer together, that myself as a supervisor, that the rest of my board, that the congressman, that others can help to lead to that process, we're here and we're committed. And I think what you'll hear also is that we've had 6, 7 different meetings over the last month or two with the neighbors to make sure that we do everything we can to get to compromise and consensus as opposed to villainization. Bruce, I'd like you to go now, but I just want you to know I'm going to be here as long as I need to tonight. If that's 10 p.m. and people have questions and they want to look at intention or discuss facts or whatever it is, but I appreciate you being here. This is civic engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Gore, and thank you to the Town Council for having us. My name is Bruce Goldstein. I serve as the Sonoma County Counsel. I've also been involved in leading the county's efforts on tribal matters for the last 10 years or so. I was asked to speak briefly about the Memorandum of Understanding or Agreement that we entered into with the tribe, and I'm happy to do so. We're providing a short summary, but we have handed out about 350 of these Sonoma County fact sheets that go into it in much greater detail. And for those of you that didn't get a copy, because I think we have more than 350 people here today, we will post it tomorrow on our Board of Supervisors website, so it'll be easy to download. Before I start, I also wanted to echo a little bit what Congressman Huffman and Supervisor Gore said. I've participated in those meetings with neighbors and interested parties that Supervisor Gore has convened, and it was very obvious the heartfelt concern and frustration that people felt. And I just hope that the information that we provide up here today goes at least a little way to addressing that concern and frustration. So without further ado, in the words of David Byrne, I guess, how did we get here? A little bit about the background. In 2007, the Lytton tribe submitted a trust application. The initial trust application was for about 147 homes on 124 acres. A number of the neighbors at the time were very concerned. I see some of them here. And we shared with them our concerns about the environmental document at that time. As Nancy mentioned, trust applications require a NEPA process because the feds are taking a federal action that requires review. And we had our concerns with that process and with the appropriate identification of impacts from that. So over the next couple of years, we worked with the neighbors and on our own invested quite a few resources to identifying what the impacts were of that project, and engaged with the tribe and worked with them to try to not only pin down what those impacts were, but also to figure out what appropriate mitigation was for that project at that time. And just one point that Nancy did mention is that the tribe's NEPA document ultimately, partly because of the input of the neighbors and the county, as well as the good faith efforts of the tribe, did identify quite a few mitigations to make sure that the off-reservation impacts of that project were addressed. But as Nancy said, without an agreement from a local government to enforce those mitigations, the federal government will take no steps to make sure that it happens. The agreement and the project grew over time, as was discussed a little bit earlier. From that initial phase of about 124 acres, it grew to about 500. Our negotiations with the tribe were off and on for many years. The county was steadfast in its concern for no gaming, and the tribe for tribal sovereignty reasons that I respect at that time, felt like they couldn't agree to that at that particular point in time. But finally, we were able to reach an agreement, and as Supervisor Gore said, on March 10th, 2015, at a public meeting of the Board of Supervisors, the board unanimously approved the MOA with the tribe. So what led to this agreement? Congressman Huffman has talked about it, others have. Really the backdrop of this is federal policy and law that Nancy went through in quite some detail about how land goes into trust. And our experience, as I said, I've worked on this issue for over 10 years. I've lobbied in Washington. I've worked with our national organization, the National Association of Counties. I've represented California State Association of Counties in Washington. And from a local government point of view, the fee trust process is fundamentally broken. And the reason for that is that it's a subjectively driven process. There are no objective standards. Nancy mentioned two of the criteria that you look at. One was, are there jurisdictional conflicts with local government? A second is there tribal need? Well, there are no standards to determine, is there tribal need if each tribal member is in poverty, or is there a tribal need if each tribal member is getting $30,000 a month? No one at the BIA could tell you, because partly it's left to tribes, as Nancy said, are sovereign, independent political organizations, and it's really up for them to decide for their people what need is. And the BIA is very deferential for that. Similarly, for a jurisdictional conflict, what is a jurisdictional conflict? Is it a jurisdictional conflict if there's a shooting range put within firing distance of a school and church, as recently was the case up at Shingle Springs, or if you put a casino next to a church or daycare facility? No one could tell you whether that's a jurisdictional conflict or not, because there are no standards. As Congressman Huffman said, the Obama administration has a goal to take 500,000 acres into trust before the end of his term, and they're well on their way to doing that. So with that as a backdrop, I won't get into all the details of the Carcieri decision, which have already been discussed, but we had to do our own analysis about whether or not the Lytton tribe was likely to get their land into trust. And we concluded that over time, that would happen. Some have talked about the Carcieri decision being a bar. From my work in Washington, I know that so-called a Carcieri clean fix, which is changing the law so that it didn't relate to 1934, but to when, again, to when a tribe submits or when its trust application is taken into trust. That has been the #1 priority of Indian country throughout the United States, and is the Obama administration's highest priority in terms of Indian issues. So ever since 2009, when the Carcieri decision took place, a bill has been introduced every session for a, quote, clean fix. A bill in 2010 passed the House and was stopped in the Senate. The leadership in the Senate has changed since that time, and now the folks who weren't in favor of a clean fix, who had managed to impede the progress of this. Now there's a look of no longer a clean fix, but a compromise bill. And one was just introduced in the Senate Indian Affairs Committee several weeks ago by Senator Barrasso, which does begin to look at some of these fee to trust issues to try to say, hey, this is a broken system. It doesn't make sense to fix Carcieri and leave a broken system. So there is tremendous pressure for a Carcieri fix, and it's our judgment that sooner or later, this land would go into trust either because of a legislative fix or because of the tribe's ability to take the land into trust administratively. So with that, just very briefly, the highlights, some of them have been touched upon, is for the MOA, the term is 22 years, no gaming in Sonoma for that period of time. And just what the county was trying to achieve by this agreement were the same thing, same policy that it's applied to every tribal application and tribal development project. One, no gaming. One, no gaming. Two, that the off-reservation impacts of a tribal development should be borne by the tribe and fully mitigated. Three, that there's substantial compliance with the general plan when we can achieve that. As Nancy said, when a tribe takes land into trust, there is no local city or county jurisdiction. There is no general plan. There is no zoning ordinances. And it's very important for tribes to be able to meet their tribal needs and to assert their governmental prerogatives through land use. That's a big way that Sonoma County does. But this tribe, in this agreement, agreed to work with the county on that. Also provides independent mitigation monitoring, compliance with California fire and building codes in all construction, payment of in lieu taxes and development fees so that the services that the county provides that generally tribes don't pay taxes on their property. Here the tribe is willing to pay in lieu taxes so that the services that we would provide to the tribe and its members through governmental functions were reimbursed just as any other citizen group. That was a tremendous concession by the tribe. There's a limited waiver of sovereign immunity that allows the agreement to be enforceable and a framework for intergovernmental relations, because the tribe has been here for a long time and they will be here for a long time, and it's important to be able to work together as sister governments to be able to work on problems that address the county as a whole, the people in this area, as well as tribal members. So what would have happened if there was no agreement? Just to wrap it up, there would be no control over land use. When that land goes into trust, the tribe could do essentially whatever they want, whatever kind of development. There'd be no environmental review. One of the aspects of this agreement, which I know provides a lot of concern, is that they have reserved for themselves the ability to do a resort and a hotel on a few of the parcels of the land. What's built into this agreement is that if they decide to do that, that there's a full NEPA environmental review that allows for the county to set up a public process to get input on that, and then a process to make sure, again, that the off-reservation impacts of that project are fully mitigated. And if the tribe and county can't reach an agreement about what those are, then it goes to binding arbitration. Very few tribes in the country have agreed to anything like that, and it shows the tribe's commitment to address the off-reservation impacts of any project that they do. In addition, as I said, no enforcement of mitigation. If the original project went into trust, those mitigation measures would be unenforceable without this agreement, as well as the possibility of gaming. So I think I've run over my time. We've already talked about Congressman Huffman's bill, and Supervisor Gore said I'm available to answer questions afterwards, or as Jeff said, people can submit cards to him and they'll be circulated for a response. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. And thank you. Are there, speaking of cards, are there any comment or question, particularly question cards out there that are ready to go? Denise can pick up. You don't know where they're. Okay, so there are 3 tables. There's one right in the center. Gentleman's pointing right there. There's a table right on the right side. It's kind of a push-around table, and there's a table right there in the back, and there's stacks of these cardboard cards and stacks of magic markers. And go at it, please, because when the speakers wrap up, then we'll go through those questions and we'll start asking them, and then you'll start coming up and making your comments. Okay, now we're going to hear from the Lytton Rancheria of California. Chairperson Mejia, you're first.
I would stand up, but due to medical reasons, I'm not able to. But I never have a problem speaking loud. So if you can't hear me, please don't hesitate to let me know. First, I'd like to talk about Lytton's connection to Sonoma County. My people have been in Sonoma County for my great-great-great-grandmother was from the Kashaya, Stewart's Point Reservation. We have been here and hope to continue to be here. We have no plans of going anywhere else. It's our original land, as was stated, was in the Alexander Valley. And as was stated, I feel like I'm being redundant here. Due to the Sonoma County becoming party to the suit, we had to make certain concessions at the time, and we did so. So having said that, we had to look for land elsewhere. Windsor was closest to our original land that we could find. I met in 1998 with the Board of Supervisors, and I asked them, where would you have us go? Because in the stipulation, the settlement agreement, it says Sonoma County will help identify an area for the land for the tribe. So having said that, they sent me to Windsor, and that's where I went. And it was closest to our original land, and we felt a connection there. Many of my members live in Windsor now. They probably are your neighbors, and you just don't know it. but we have a strong tie to the community. Native people care about the community. Our housing, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at the plans for the housing, but it's keeping within the landscape of the area. We're not building high-rise penthouses. We're not doing anything that you wouldn't be proud to live in, okay? So, you know, that kind of just draws to our why we're in Sonoma County. Tribal responsibility to our members. My tribal council is the governing body of my tribe. That allows us to enter into negotiations and to conduct business in the best interest of my tribal people. We have tried to do that in a way that is diversifying away from gaming. We understand that gaming is not popular, for number one. Number two, it's really not an answer, but it's what Congress gave tribes that would generate the revenue that they needed to reestablish their homelands. But we all recognize the fact that at any time that could stop, or it could open up statewide, and there'll be a casino on every corner, and will be just another 7-Eleven. So our goal, the Tribal Council's goal, is to diversify so that if there was a time when gaming stopped, then we would be able to take care of our tribal government and our tribal members and continue to function as a tribe. We take no government assistance whatsoever. Well, I take that back. We take a small behavioral health grant and we turn it over to Sonoma County Indian Health to help other natives in the community who have no other means of health care. My tribe also supports Sonoma County Indian Health Project with $600,000 a year. My members are all covered with health care. They have the top-notch Aetna plan. But we recognize that there's a lot of our native people in this community that don't have health care funding and don't have anything. So we try to subsidize that for them. And that helps all of you because your tax dollars are being saved by emergency room visits that are quite costly and I might add unfunded emergency room visits. So we feel like we're doing a service in that respect. We have agreements with the Windsor School District, the fire department, in addition to what we have with the county, and we're very proud of that. So my tribal council, the governing body with the support of the tribe, we meet regularly and we go over all of this stuff, and we understand that we have to make those concessions to a point so that we can move forward and not get blocked in a stalemate. So that is why we worked with the county the way we did. The tribal council process. Some of you have been saying, well, there is no tribe, it's just a bunch of non-Indian people doing. No, that's not the case. I travel quite extensively. Up until the last 2 years,